Hi, Dave from Informed American here. I hope you're having a great Friday. And yesterday we posed to you this question, a question that's really been on my mind over the last few days and weeks, which is really two questions. But do you believe that Americans can bridge the deep divide that's facing us, or should we instead split up into like-minded independent nations? That's the question that we pose to all of you, and we got a lot of responses, which I'm going to get through. So I'm certainly I'm gonna gonna walk through those. But yeah, I mean, this is a topic that's been on my mind. I'm sure it's been on your mind. It's been, I mean, the political polarization. Let's start there. The political polarization in the United States has been increasing and increasing over the last couple of decades. In fact, if you go to Pew Research has a great analysis of this. It's called, and you could search this here on the Pew Research Center, political polarization, 1994 to 2017, and it basically shows it's sort of like two humps, if you will. One is red is for Republicans, the other is blue for Democrats. And what you see is in 1994, the typical measuring the median view, the median idea here, where the median Democrat versus the median Republican, they were sort of here in 1994. But as we've gone, they've become further and further and further apart, which is distressing, and I think it matches what we're seeing on the ground here, doesn't it? It seems like things are so polarized. And by the way, if you haven't had a chance to respond to that question, chat with me or go ahead and comment below. I'm going to read all those. If anybody has anything to say on this topic or anything that we're going after now, feel free to comment. What do you think? I mean, do you think that we can bridge this deep divide that we have? It is, guys. It's really bad out there, and we hear it in what's going on in our discourse. I mean, there's a lot of people that love Trump. Republicans, his support is about 95%. But there's just as many people in the country who absolutely hate the guy and will never vote for him at all. And I mean, just think about in November, what's going to happen? Trump wins, right? I mean, the people that hate him are going to be furious. And guys, if you love Trump and you want him to win and he loses, what are you going to feel about your country? What are you going to feel about the direction of your country? So, yeah, check out this stuff from Pew, how they're showing the political polarization going on. Has been ongoing over the past couple of decades. And then we saw this with the coronavirus, didn't we? I mean, that thing became political. We had red states that wanted to open, blue states that wanted to stay locked down, and now we've got this protest stuff. So, of course, I mean, which has become political. Not necessarily that people are. I mean, most people, I think, you watch that video and you see this. There's no reason why a man who's already in handcuffs should be put in a position like that to die. Nobody really wants that, but it again turns into something political. Because we had peaceful protests, which then turned, of course, as we all seen, violent. There was riots, there was burning, and you would be shocked, and I'm sure you've seen the same thing, of how many, if you're on social media here, of course you are on Facebook, or if you're on Twitter, I'm sure you've seen this, but I was shocked at how much support for the violence I saw. With the looting and the rioting and the burning, saying, well, these stores, and I know you heard this, and I mentioned it a couple of times. Well, these places have insurance. Wow, I mean, imagine that. As I said, so does your house. Do you want your house burned down? That has insurance too. And by the way, there won't be insurance if this keeps happening. You won't be able to insure anything. But the point is, I saw so much of people either endorsing the violence or just completely denying that it's even happening, claiming that all these protests were peaceful. And certainly the media has been stoking the flames of our polarization. And here's an example here from Slate just 2 days ago. Here's a tweet here linking to an article. Nonviolence is an important tool for protests, but so is violence. Slate magazine endorsing violent protest. Says a nice peaceful protest may not bring about the big structural change America needs. So, we need big structural change in America. We need to get violent. We need to riot in the streets in order to get what we want. Is that the country you want to live in, guys? And that's kind of the genesis of this question, which is, I mean, are things so far apart? Are things so broken that maybe we need to really think about a nice divorce of sorts? Of course, we've had blue states and red states, and even, and I'm sure you've seen, I posted a couple of examples of some iterations. This is not new, by the way. I mean, you could just Google America split up or something like that, and you will get countless articles saying we need a national divorce of some kind, and how things are so irreconcilable with things like, I don't know, so gun control, abortion, free speech, depending, things like that, taxes. Who knows? Do we want a stronger safety net, social safety net, or a weaker one? Things like that. And by the way, most Americans don't. Speaking of the violence, back to that for a second. There was that poll. 58% of Americans wanted the military to come in and clean up the streets. I mean, is that not a divide? And on the other hand, you have people out in the streets doing violence, and of course, the good guys who are trying to peacefully protest, that all gets blown up by the bad actors. But and what kind of structural change is there? Well, in Minneapolis, the city council is going to vote on dismantling the police department. Yes, you read that right. It hasn't been done yet, but one of the things they want to do, the mayor says he's committed to, this comes from the Star Tribune, working with the community towards deep structural reforms that address systemic racism in our laws and policing. However, the mayor says he doesn't support abolishing the police department. But one of the things, one of the council members says that she wants to replace the police department with a transformative new model of public safety. In an interview, this is Council Member Bender here. She says she would imagine a scenario where the state's investigation results they take in the police department, but what would happen is the police becomes part of a wider public safety department oriented towards violent prevention and community-based services. It says in that kind of scenario, it's possible that social workers or medics could respond to some calls now being handled by police. Does that sound like, so say someone gets shot, they just bring in a social worker and the medics? They don't bring anyone to try to track down the guy who pulled the trigger to arrest them? Is that what it is? Just no arrests? That sounds really weird. But hey, and if maybe, and then that goes back to the original part of the question. Maybe you want to live in a place like that. Maybe you want to live in a place where the police power is greatly restricted, and maybe that's the country you want to live in. So, number of you guys, I am going to read through your comments here, but I do want to walk through something I want to bring your attention to. There is this one of these maps, and the one that's in the announcement post for this video, comes from a book, which is a great book that I highly recommend. You can find it on Amazon, called American Nations: A History of the 11 Rival Regional Cultures in North America. So there's a story here from Business Insider saying, the title here, if you want to find it, and I may link to this later, says, "This map shows how America is divided into 11 nations," and that's the one I posted here. But there's a quote here from Colin, the author is Colin Woodard, and he argues that the U.S. has long been divided into several cultural entities that, with only a couple of notable exceptions, have somehow been able to coexist along one side another. So let me just... Excuse me, I got a frog in my throat today. Excuse me, sorry. But he writes, "The original North American colonies were settled by people from distinct regions of the British Isles and from France, the Netherlands, and Spain, each with its own religious, political, and ethnographic traits. For generations, these Euro-American cultures developed in isolation from one another, consolidating their cherished religious and political principles and fundamental values, and expanding across the eastern half of the continent in nearly exclusive settlement bands. Throughout the colonial period and the early republic, they saw themselves as competitors for land, capital, and other settlers, and even as enemies, taking opposing sides in the American Revolution, the War of 1812, and the Civil War. There has never been an America, but rather several Americas, each a distinct nation. There are 11 nations today," and you can see in the map here just one example of how he broke them down. And if you are supporting breaking up the United States, it won't be red states and blue states, because if you look at that in a map, I mean, you've got like California over here, and then New York over there, and then Chicago in the middle. That's not a country. There's no contiguous landmass. So how would you break it up? Well, in this book, Colin Woodard has his 11, and it's really interesting because it goes down, and he explains he's got Yankeedom. He calls this that's basically northeast most of New England and part of New York State, a little bit of Pennsylvania. He calls this the brains of America. This region has kept the Protestant ethics of its founders, valuing education, sacrificing for the greater good, and intellectual development. However, many of the other nations regard Yankee utopian streak with trepidation, right? Think Harvard, right? How many times have we heard that, right? Or the New York elites, the Harvard elites, kind of looking down on the rest of America a little bit as our betters, right? Coming down, they're like essentially the unofficial religion. They sort of determine the national narrative. So that's the point. Well, goodbye Yankee to make your own place. And then there's New Netherlands. This region retains the sophistication and commercial bent its Dutch founders exhibited in the 17th century, materialistic with a profound tolerance for ethnic and religious diversity, and an unflinching commitment to the freedom of inquiry and conscience. Now that's basically, New Netherlands is basically the New York metropolitan area, and that makes sense. So a little carve out there for New York City, surrounding area there, part of Connecticut, New Jersey. I mean, it really is kind of his own country, right? I mean, in a lot of ways. I understand that. Then there's the Midlands. Now, the Midlands covers, it's a little kind of weird in this map, but it's sort of like from like Delaware through all the way through most of the heartland and then through into the Mississippi River. It's kind of hard to describe on a map. It's kind of a strange cutout, but I guess he does it here so that you could get at least not be landlocked. But what he calls the Midland is a politically moderate, though somewhat inward-looking, despite a fair amount of ethnic diversity. The legacy of having been settled by both Germans and English Quakers. It shares the Yankee belief that society can be organized to benefit ordinary people, though it rejects top-down government intervention. Interesting. And then there's Tidewater. That's sort of Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, North Carolina area in the coast. Tidewater it's in the South, but not of the South. Places have a premium on tradition that today is in decline, as Yankee values have breached through the Mason-Dixon line and have been tickling into places like Charlotte. Does this ring true for any of you? And then there is the Deep South, which is most of what you would consider part of Texas, a little bit of Louisiana, Alabama, northern central Florida, most of Georgia, and South Carolina. And this rejects all forms of regulation. Well, that sounds about right. Whether from taxes or through environmental policy, and occasionally shows signs of its historical penchant for restricting liberty. No, but that's interesting, right? I mean, after all these years, I mean, the South, the Deep South does have a character, doesn't it? Jerry Anderson says the divide is between just and unjust, good and evil. Not so. It's just doubtful they will bridge themselves. Yeah, I mean, thank you, Jerry, for that comment. And is it going to happen? I don't know. I mean, we had a civil war once, and I don't want another one. But did it solve our problems? Not really. I mean, if anything, the things have gotten stranger because as the country has shifted and changed. Okay, so moving on here to continuing on describing these 11 nations. There's Greater Appalachia, which is most of North Texas. You're getting into Arkansas, Missouri, Kentucky, Tennessee, that area there. That maybe looks like southern Indiana, southern Illinois, possibly. So Greater Appalachia. I'm just scrolling up here. Founded by war-ravaged British subjects, this region has a mercurial set of values, having supported the Union during the Civil War, but now favoring conservative ethics. Interesting. Then there's El Norte. El Norte takes much of Mexico, interestingly, and then all of South Texas, South and East New Mexico, Southern Arizona, and basically the Southern California, Los Angeles area. El Norte is described this way. Though Spain once controlled the entire western part of the country, its Latin influence has now been confined to this region. Norteños have a reputation for being exceptionally independent, self-sufficient, adaptable, and focused on work. Interesting. And then there's New France. There's Far West. The Far West. This is the conservative West, developed through large investment in industry, yet where inhabitants continue to resent the Eastern interests that initially controlled that investment. I mean, all of this stuff rings true, doesn't it? And the Far West is basically, the Great Plains and the Rocky Mountains, and western part of California, Oregon, and Washington, and of course taking up all of Nevada, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, Utah, most of Colorado. And then we get New France. This is basically New Orleans area. New France is described, and I mean, this makes sense, right? A pocket of liberalism nestled in the deep South. Doesn't that sound like its own place, right? It's not really. It's in the South, but not quite like it, right? It says where 18th century Enlightenment values still prevail. Its people have emerged as a down-to-earth, egalitarian, and consensus-driven among the most liberal on the continent. So that's New France, but not quite as liberal as the next one, which is the left coast, a hybrid of Yankee utopians and Appalachian self-expression and exploration, where farms and iPods can live side by side. And the left coast is about what you would imagine. It's that little bit of it's about It's basically Northern California, all of Oregon, all of Washington, but interestingly, part of moving up into Canada. So that would encapsulate Vancouver. And then there's the First Nation. This is enjoys de facto independence thanks to its Native American legacy. Yet this often comes at an economic cost. So First Nation would basically be a carve out for Native peoples. But I'd love to know what do you think, first of all, before I get to your comments. What do you think of this 11 nation map? What do you think of how it breaks down? I mean, did these me describing these regions, did that ring true to you? It certainly seems to ring true to me. I mean, people who live in the far west are nothing like the people who live in the deep south, who are really very different than Harvard people, with New England, the upper Midwest, the Tidewater region. What does the deep south have in common with the left coast in this instance? What does San Francisco and Tallahassee, are those places at all related? Does that feel like the same country? By the way, interesting thing here, he lops off southern half of Florida and just basically puts as part of the Caribbean in a new nation. But I mean, speaking as a Floridian, I live in the Tampa Bay area, and I'll tell you, I have nothing in common with say Miami. What's going on there? It feels like it could be another state. It feels like it could be another country entirely. So I'd love to know what you think about this 11 nation breakup, or or there was another map we posted. It was essentially regional. I'd love to know what you think about that. So with that, of course, you can comment here. I will read your comment. With that, I will get to your responses here as we pose this question: Can we bridge this deep growing divide, or should we split up into like-minded independent nations? All right, let's hit off the top here. Craig Meyer says the divided states of America may very well split into many nations, leaving Canada and Mexico seemingly undivided on the surface. Time will tell. To be honest, I don't desire a split of the U.S. So Craig is not in favor of it. Do you agree with that? Jackie Riley says, we only have one big problem, and the Democratic Party forever. Is that going to solve the problem? Jackie, say it would just become something else. And, even something to keep in mind, too, and if you did split off, maybe the Deep South becomes its own country. There will be a liberal opposition that forms. Certainly nothing like what you get out of like Nancy Pelosi or something like that. But there will be a balance there. Michael Mangiati says America is not divided, and we all support peace and law and order. Well, I think I disagree with you there, Michael, that we're not divided. I think we're very divided, and I think those divisions run deep. John Lord says no. I don't think it will last. Not if the one world government people and Soros and the rest of them keep at it. They want to destroy this country. So, John's thinking that this union may not last. Dennis Berger says an electoral college format is needed for elections. In Pennsylvania, in many states, the urban Democrat dumpsters in PA, it's just Philadelphia and Pittsburgh control the entire state. PA is mostly conservative, but we're overruled by these cities. And I think maybe, Dennis, the thing about that on a countrywide basis, right? I mean, you have much of the United States, if you want to call it Red America. On the other hand, you've got some places on the West Coast in California. You've got New York, Washington D.C., and Chicago. I mean, that tends to dominate too. So it is interesting. I mean, imagine a country that where the votes of California didn't matter. I mean, say California becomes its own country. or Texas becomes its own country, and suddenly politics become very, very different, don't they? Phil Svet says irreparable. I can never get along with these Dems again. Chum the waters and toss them in the ocean. All right. Well, we weren't asking for what to do with the Democrats, Phil. Dan Amon says, love the South. All right, Dan. Dan, if you're listening, or David, rather, if you're listening, what did you think about that? What do you think about the Deep South as described in the 11 Nations article? What do you think about that being able to form its own nation? Lonnie Pierce says, no, Virginia has been kicked out of the South. That's interesting. Michael Mills says, don't lump Arizona in with the liberal wackadoos from Cali and Washington. Yeah, so very different there. Vicky DeLu says, independent nation. Tim Owen says, the Yanks can have northeastern Virginia. The South welcomes the rest of the state. So that's how it would split up, right? You can have Washington, D.C. or the places around it. That can be its own thing. And then all the others say, we're getting this. The more rural areas, more conservative folks, you can have your own thing. And then you can build your own cities. Michael Boyle says, the South would get crowded quickly. Yeah, possibly. Well, the South has been getting crowded over the last couple of decades. If people have been fleeing northern states for the South. But that brings up something interesting, too, which is, what would immigration be like? Or what could this thing look like? Would it be something like the European Union, where you have sort of, of course you have like France, Germany, Italy, countries like that, where they can have their own laws, kind of a thing, but they also have an economic zone. They're on the same currency, that kind of a thing. Would you guys be in favor of something like that, where you can make your own laws, but we all use the dollar? Then, what do you do about immigration? As Michael Boyle says, the South would get crowded quickly. But if you have your own country, maybe you have different immigration laws. Maybe in the European Union they have free movement, but maybe in this example, you have your own nation and you have stricter immigration. So maybe the South wouldn't get crowded so quickly because we're going to decide, no, we're not going to let all you people move down here or over here. Robert Graham says, overall, yes, though personally, Arizona and Nevada and frontier. Oklahoma and Kansas in the Midwest. Yeah. Carrie Joe says, take Arizona, Alaska, and Nevada out of the Pacific and add New York, D.C., and Virginia. The rest of us are not so crazy. Okay. Jim Walburn says, no, we're never going to bridge the divide, no matter if the protest lasts 50 more years. Wow. So Jim, is this thing broken? I don't know. Tom Elliott says, what the hell are you giving us Virginia for? I don't know. I didn't draw the map, Tom. Ed Bradford says, I believe it's only two ideologies. It might look like New England, California, Oregon, and Washington being socialist states of America, and the rest would choose whether or not to let them starve. Eunice says, we'll make it. So Eunice thinks we can bridge the divide and we're going to be okay. Patricia Staunch says, it's beyond repair. To the left of me, to the right, or Joker's to the right. That's funny. Stuck in the middle with you. Let's just divorce. Blue states on one side of the country, red states on the other, an extremely large wall down the middle. I think we know who will come knocking for more child support. Interesting there. So Patricia says it's over. Patricia says build the wall. And split everybody up. Patrick Graham says, I don't see a split coming, but if Trump follows through with deploying the military on American soil, the left and Antifa will get their civil war, but they won't like what's going to come. So, yeah, interesting. And we got a reply to that from Rich saying one side can't pick a bathroom, while the other side has all the firearms. Thanks, Rich, for that. Tom Billy, that was a great comment. Tom Billy says, "Is this the pre-war map? People have roots in for generations." So that's interesting, Tom. That kind of goes along. That's sort of the point of this 11 Nation map, with the book here written by Colin Woodard. Is what he's saying is these places have roots. These places have been, kind of going, they've had their own history and they've evolved within that history in their own way, which is very different than what happened in all the different places around the country. And to say we're all one is very misleading. Jerry Bates posted a picture of it's the United States with it says Texas in red and everything else in blue, that is not Texas. So let's say Jerry Bates at least supports Texas independence, and the rest of you can figure it all out yourselves. Sean Stone says, not interested in a divide conversations. Get it out of your heads. All right, Sean. Tommy Searcy says, it may come to that. It's not what I want. Yeah, Tommy, I mean, is that what you guys want? I mean, would it be better if people who believed in one sort of a thing found other people like that and formed their own thing rather than all of this fighting? Doug Moore says, who in their right mind would think that Arizonans have anything in common with California, Oregon, and Washington? Greg Hines says, the South was right. Oh, Greg, three replies to that. Yeah, then some, well, that's disgusting. Let's forget about that. Jackie Dunham says, split into fools and criminals and then conservatives. Yeah, okay. Patricia Hume says, perhaps 3 states that are on the Pacific coast could just become one country or drop off. That is sort of that is one of the far left coasts there. That it does make sense. That basically Northern California up. That does seem like it could be its own place. George Hauser says in capitals no. Ruth Gerber says I like it. All right, Ruth. Well, that rounds up all of your comments. It really is an interesting topic, and these divisions are going to continue. We hope that they will heal, but in the meantime, it does not look good, and it's very, very interesting to see what comes of it. I think breaking up is hard to do. Divorces are hard, so I hear, and a national divorce could be painful, but is it what we need? It is something interesting to think about. Well, thank all of you for tuning in. I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll catch you on the next video.